This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Kanya.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. Yes, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff does like to travel far, galactically speaking. However, today we get to go a little shorter, across the pond.
This is going to be a fantastic episode. What problem are we solving today?
How do plants survive in extreme habitats?
How do plants survive in extreme habitats? Oh, this is going to be really fun. Who is our special guest today, Jeff?
This is going to be so much fun. Today we have expert gardener, author, and broadcaster from the United Kingdom, Matthew Biggs. He trained at the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew.
Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. And, you know, it's going to be really interesting, I think, to talk about plants because we haven't really kind of investigated everything to do with plants. But I like to start with my first question. Did you always love plants as a kid? Were you one of those kids that dug in the garden and made your own garden and planted things and grew it?
No.
Of course not.
Of course, yeah. Nobody says yes. So how did you get into plants then?
My mum had a garden. My dad loved the countryside. I worked in an office for a very short time because I didn't have many qualifications. And I think, you know, I'd love to work outside. I used to see people in the summer in the gardens and started to think gardens are really nice. And my mum started taking me around gardens, and my father loved all the historic gardens that were in Britain. And little by little, I had to give up the fight because it was taking me over. It was almost like a big green but wonderful monster that wrapped its arms around and said, come with me, Matthew, to garden. So I just couldn't resist. It was great.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
I love that. That sounds like a story waiting to happen.
Yes.
And somebody's going to buy the film rights, and I can picturing it on a big screen.
A great picture book, yes, for kids.
Absolutely. So how did you allow, I think a lot of our listeners are young and, you know, they like something and they realize, okay, they like it. And then they start doing it more. And then they start doing it a little more. If you can think of words, how did you feel yourself, like, let it take you over?
It's really interesting you should say that, Jeff, because I moved to work for a local authority. So I was working, you know, in parks in the city where I lived in Leicester in the town hall square. And it was really little by little, minute steps, not baby steps, minute little. Little by little, it took me over. And the more I got into it, and particularly when I was able to go to Kew, I mean, to go to a place like that, this garden, listeners, it's a really ancient garden.
Yes.
And they've got examples of deserts, of rainforest, of alpine, of temperate zones.
Wow.
They've really ancient plants that have been there for centuries. It was once a garden that belonged to the King and Queen of England, and they started up a small collection of plants. So it was just the perfect place for it. And really, it just became more and more. It was like, you know how you start a snowball and you start pushing it
Yes,
and
yes.
then gets bigger and bigger. Well, it was like that. So I started off with quite an interest in plants, thought this is good. And the more I got into it, the more exciting it became. And I learned about the plants in the desert and thought, wow, I'd love to go to a desert one day. And I thought, what must it be like to be a plant living at the top of a mountain, hunkering down a stone, with it raining very rarely. What would I do when I'm hungry? How will I survive? I started to learn that plants were able to live in all sorts of places around the world. And in fact, it's only places like the Antarctic where there is a giant ice sheet, the biggest desert in the world, that there are very few plants. And I wanted to find out more about flowering plants in the Antarctic. And there are actually 2 kinds of flowering plants in the Antarctic.
Really? I didn't know there were any plants there.
And because of climate change, the ice cap melting, these plants are getting more and more established. And what really I found fascinating with this one is that the ones that live on very rocky ground where there's not much soil, they just stay very tiny and small. But if they're by the sea, near the seal where the seals live and the penguins live, then they get this lovely breakfast, lunch, and dinner is penguin and seal poo.
Nice fertilizer there, natural fertilizer.
Absolutely. Just the job if you're that kind of plant.
That's so cool. So yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about is plants growing in extreme places. But also you could see all of this or a lot of this in Kew Gardens in the UK. Can you explain that? They have like a hothouse or like a greenhouse? How does that work?
They do. They have hot houses, and you've got similar botanical gardens. Don't forget all your wonderful American botanical gardens.
Yes.
I mean, you can go to, is it the Arizona Desert Botanical Gardens? And there you've got all the plants, and people will tell you about the deserts. So we put all our temperature-loving plants in greenhouses, but also the alpine plants from the top of the mountains, because top of the mountains, the conditions are similar to the poles, the Antarctic and the Arctic. The altitude. So you've got the snow and the short growing season. So plants have to be kept dry because they spend a lot of their life under a lovely big duvet of snow. And then it all melts away and they do there's much growing as they possibly can. Flower quickly, flower, and trying to attract the insects. And some of them will move around to catch the sun. So it's almost like saying to the flies that are around, come and sit in this deck chair. It's very warm.
I love that.
They bring in the pollinators in all sorts of different ways.
Wow.
Because that's what it is for the plants. It's like for the plants, the same for us, it's about surviving. And the plants do so much for us, as well as make the world beautiful. They're really, really important for our survival.
That's very true. Yeah.
I absolutely love how you talk about it and how you were describing how you grew into what you loved, because it was all about asking questions.
Yes, curiosity.
And the way you were asking the questions it reminded me of Einstein and how he figured out general relativity. The story goes, he started with the question of, what would it be like if I sat on the end of a light beam, a beam of light? And you were just asking the question as if you were the plants.
Yes.
How do I get some food? Where can I get some sunshine? Have you always asked questions in that manner, or did you notice because you found a passion for plants that you started asking the question like that about plants?
That's really interesting because I ask questions about the plants, when you first see them. So people will sometimes say to me, Matt, I've got a really silly question.
Okay.
Yes.
I would say to your listeners, there's no such thing as a silly question. We're
Agreed.
We're born with that knowledge. So the more questions that you ask and the more inquisitive, why is this? How is this? What is this? When did this happen? What will happen if I do this? Then they're the kind of lovely questions that your listeners ask. Because they ask those questions, they then educate themselves and learn to understand. And the more you understand, the more you can care for things, the more you can enjoy things, the more you can share. I think it's really important that if you love plants, if you love space, if you love the underwater world, whatever it is, then share it with your friends and try and make sure that everybody that you know knows about your interest, but also has an interest of their own, because it makes life so exciting, so interesting. And wherever you go, you will always be asking questions. And when I went to Kew, of course, we were taught, I had to go and sit very politely and listen when you'd rather be outside rummaging about or what have you. But that's how you learn, and you've got to keep your eyes open all the time. Now, I'm always looking, where are the plants? Look at that moss growing on the roof of the house. I wonder what kind of moss it is. Who could I find out who could tell me? Where could I look on the internet? And then you can keep a little list of the mosses growing on the roof of your house and how they change. Or look at the weeds growing in the car park at school, something like that, and just see where things have popped up. But keep your eyes open all the time, and your ears open. So important to keep your eyes and your ears open to learn things. And I believe everyone has got an enthusiasm, an interest, something that fires them up. Whether it be, I don't know, whether it be cars or engineering or arts, or whether you're really good at school at making things, then find an interest. And I would be so happy if you met me one day and said, Matt, I'm interested in plants and the world.
See, and so you fit very well into the show, Matthew, because that's what we're all about, is curiosity and finding whatever, you're passionate about and sharing it with others. So I'm curious, though. So what part of gardening drew you in? Was it did you plant your own plants and grow them, and that's what got you interested? Or were you just curious about the world around you and saw plants? Or did you immediately jump to, why is that moss growing there? Or I love this. Why are those weeds growing in, the parking spot? What drew you in specifically?
It's only later in my life, and this is why you're discovering all the time. You're discovering about yourself. You're discovering things about the world around you. And I suddenly realized that I love stories. If you've got a story for me, and it's something different and it's interesting and it's odd and it's unusual, and lots of plants have stories, or lots of plants are really quirky. There's one plant that I love, and it's found high in the mountains in the tropical parts of the world. Actually, just on 2 mountains in Borneo, there is what we would normally think of as a pitcher plant, an insectivorous plant. And they have a big bucket, and they have different ways of attracting insects to sometimes mammals into them. The mammals fall into the bucket, they drown, and then they rot away, and takes all the goodness. But this particular one, which is called the king monkey cup, it has a completely different way of getting its food. And it's got the bucket shape, it's got the lid. But there are 2 species. There's a species of shrew, and species is a word for kind.
Right. So,
and they've all got their science names. So there is a kind of shrew with this specific science name, and a kind of rat. And instead of trapping them, we're back to poo. I'm afraid we are back to poo. But they put their paws, one on each, corner of the circle, as it were, and they use it as a toilet. Now, to make sure that they are attracted to this toilet, where the seat, incidentally, is exactly the right size for an adult to put its paws on. So
oh my gosh!
I found a scientific paper fairly recently where some Australian scientists have been and then measured all the angles of the toilet seat and how it sat, and it was perfect for the size of these 2 insects.
In the plant. The seed is in the plant.
Yeah, these 2 rodents. And so when it went for a poo, on the inside of the toilet seat, if you like, there was nectar. So they would sit and lick the nectar.
There you go.
Reward. while fertilizing the plant. And it's believed there's actually something in that nectar that makes them go to the toilet to make sure. And this is what's called,
wow.
so it's a word called
I don't know what to say to
symbiosis.
that.
It's called symbiosis. If you've got a friend, Jennifer, in fact, you have got a friend, you've got Jeff. You say to Jeff, come and help me out with this, will you, Jeff? And I will give you a cup of tea or a cup of coffee.
Yes.
And Jeff will go, yeah, no, that's fine.
Of course I will.
It's
Yes.
called symbiosis is the word.
Yeah.
So helping each other. And so the rat or the shrew is helping the plant by fertilizing it. And in return, the plant says, that's really kind of you. Thank you very much. It means I can stay alive. Here, in return,
Wow.
nice sugary nectar, have a nice sort of sweet drink to give you the energy that you need to scamper around and to go around and to eat the things you need. So in the world of plants and nature, there's a lot of helping one another. And I think that's a really good lesson for all of us. You know, if we all help each other, like the plants help each other in a lot of ways, then we will all get by and we will all have a great time.
So is that what kind of drew you to plants then, was learning all these kind of interesting, obscure fun facts, which I think is cool.
Oh, that was amazing.
That's amazing.
You know, it is the fun facts, and it is the fact that isn't it incredible that a plant can live on the top of a mountain and how they do it. I think that's it. If you took a plant from the Amazon rainforest and put it on the top of the mountain, well, it just wouldn't survive.
No.
And if you took a plant from the top of the mountain and put it in the rainforest, it wouldn't survive. So what's fascinating is that every plant has a niche. And the niche is like a little place where it can live, a little gap where it can live and be happy. And that goes right throughout the world, according to the different climates there are, whether you're in Norway or whether you're in northern US. Just thinking about, Jennifer, where you live in Florida.
Yeah.
It's so different, completely different, you were telling me before we started recording. And if you looked at the plants that live in Florida, and the plants that live in Colorado, where Jeffrey is, they are completely different, you know. And
our plants would shiver and freeze up there, Jeff.
They just don't take them there. Don't take them. But so if you look at plants and look at the shapes of the leaves and the shapes of the plants, and say, for example, the cacti in the desert, they're all under this lovely umbrella of the plant world. But the shapes and the sizes and the colors of the flowers and the way that they are pollinated by bees or butterflies or bats.
Wow.
Bats are really important in the tropics. All of these things. And that's what, as the listeners know, is part of an ecosystem. And that's why it's really important that we take care of the plants. And the plants are primarily there. No, they are plants are very, very important for the survival of animals and humans.
Where were you when I was taking botany? Because I thought botany was really boring. But if I had you as a teacher, my gosh, I'd be like, hey, I get it. It's now exciting.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? You've got to be able to make it work for people and make them so they go, oh, yeah, do you know what? That piece of information is really important to me and to the way I live. And or this piece of science is happening, whether it's in physics or chemistry or whether, I heard one of your programs be about sustainable clothing or recycling. All these things are just sort of really important and really relevant. So these subjects that you're covering are actually includes all of us. And that's
what we're going for.
And that's why plants, I've got to tell everyone who listens how important plants are for, the clothes that I'm wearing are made out of cotton. If you're wearing jeans, that's made out of plant material. You have some medicine. I've got a bit of a sore throat. So what did I have? And Jennifer had said to me she'd done the same.
Yes.
Lemon. It's a beautiful tree, has lovely fragrant flowers, lovely to have in the garden. And I'm sure some of you who are listening I've got a lemon tree in the garden. And I'll go, oh, really? I can't grow lemons in the garden here in the UK. It's just not right. And the honey, of course, coming from the bees. So the bees pollinate, so they move the pollen plant. So we get our fruit crops and our food crops, but they also provide honey as harvested. So when Matt's got a bit of a sore throat, here you are, Matt, here's some honey.
Nice.
So it's my clothes. And I just love for everybody to understand, plants make a garden beautiful. And when and make us happy, it's a lovely place to go and sit in the sunshine. And then like I said to you, I love the stories, the histories. How did this plant from China end up being in a garden centre in the UK or being in a garden centre in the US?
I never would have thought of that. Would you have thought of that, Jeff? Like plants that way?
Not my first way of thinking of it. I was much more on the, wow, that one's pretty, or wow, that one's cool. But I want to bring us back to sort of what our topic was on. I love your passion for this, because I think our topic can bring this into Galactic Space Geek Jeff's world. You were just talking about how plants can survive and grow anywhere.
Yeah.
And they're so versatile. Well, in our search for life outside of the Earth, we don't often think that we are going to find a plant. Most of the time, kids want to know that we're going to find a little green man. Or little green aliens. Or the scientists are like, well, it's probably going to be more like a single-celled amoeba or something like that. But we don't necessarily think of the plants. Can you talk a little more broadly on why it's important for us to learn how plants are staying alive and thriving in these extreme environments?
I think it means that if we understand how they grow and how they work, it's the furtherance of knowledge. It's really important that we understand. We can sometimes learn things from the way, there is a special word and I can't remember it, but there are groups of engineers and scientists who look at nature, who look at plants, Here's an example for you. There was a man who was an inventor who was walking his dog, and his dog had quite long hair on it, and dog's name was Mika, and it was an Irish pointer, a particular. And he suddenly noticed that stuck to the fur were lots of seed heads with hooks on them. And he knew they were hooks because he actually picked them off the dog under his microscope. And then he thought, that's really interesting. You've got furry dog with hooky plant. And hooky plant was able to latch onto the dog. And that's where Velcro came from.
Yeah. So
I love that example.
Are you looking for biomimicry? Is that the word?
Biomimicry.
Yes.
I'm so pleased to be. This is why I need to be around people like you.
I have a book called Beastly Bionics, which is all about biomimicry, where I get kids looking at plants and animals and how either parts of them or all of them can be turned into possibly robots or something else to help humans. So biomimicry is cool.
It is really cool. I'm so pleased you've written a book about that.
Yes.
Everybody who's listening, go and buy the book because you'll find it amazing.
Thank you for that.
Because the thing is, again, it's this curiosity. It will tell you things and you go, do you know, I mean, the story I've just told you about Velcro is probably the most famous story. But I bet you, Jennifer, have been rootling around in little corners and tapping out on your search engines to find the weird and the wonderful. And I think we look at science to understand the world around us, to understand how we can conserve and care for the world around us, how we can look after plants in the wild, because it's very important, because we've already said, they provide our medicines, our clothes, our food, our houses, all these things, the vegetables we eat, the air that we breathe. If I just go like this, I'm going to breathe in. Listen, can you hear me breathing in? And I'm breathing in oxygen. And the plants have actually produced that oxygen. Now I breathe out again, and that's CO2. And the plants will breathe that in.
Yeah, so it's an amazing process when you think about it. And, nature has figured it out. So why not look to nature to help figure out some of the other problems we're trying to solve?
Absolutely. The other thing is that NASA have already sent seeds into space. The Royal Botanic Society sent some basil seeds into space to see whether the radioactivity, the condition there would affect, when they sowed them all again, would affect how they grew. In fact, it's amazing you should mention this, because in the village, I live in a little village about 30 miles away from London. So in my little village, there is a man who is actually an astronomer and worked in space science. And he came to me one day and he said, Matt, he said, would you like to come and see my moon tree? Moon tree?
Oh, yes, I know of those.
Yeah, moon trees are wonderful.
That NASA sent a whole range of seeds into space. So he's got one of the offspring of the seed.
Wow,
that's
fantastic.
So the tree itself hasn't been in space, but it's mum and dad have. So that's near enough for me. If it's mum and dad have been into space, and it's quite interesting that the plant has actually just grown as you would normally expect it. And if you think about it, you think they're going into space and thinking about if you want to colonize Mars, if you want to colonize the moon, you're going to have to have a way of growing plants, because
you are.
That's right.
You don't grow plants there. And that's how important they are. And this is what the message that we have to keep on remembering. Plants are so important. Plants are so important for so many things. And if you get that into your head, then you start to care for them, find them interesting, find about their stories, discover that you've got a moon tree in your village. Oh, I was thrilled. I was so excited.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yes.
It was just a piece of fantastic information. So plants, I think, are affecting our everyday life without us.
Very much so.
Yes.
There is something, actually, Jeff and Jennifer, there is something we call it plant blindness. Because plants are there, fades into the background, we don't really notice plants. We don't really. They don't meow. They don't bark. They don't slither or anything like that. And they just stand there and do their job. And so we don't notice that they're there lining the, and we might notice them if they're in flower or if you get it's on your jumper or something like that. And we call it plant blindness because people just aren't aware of plants and the importance of plants, but it can be cured. It can be cured by getting plants.
Right.
How amazing they are.
So I believe as part of the cure, Jennifer just mentioned one of her books.
Yeah.
And you tell our listeners about your book.
Yes.
Well, that's really kind of you to say that, Jeff. I had the best time ever writing this book, because it was all about fascinating facts and quirky things. The baobab tree in Africa on the savannah, during drought periods, the elephants will gouge out with their tusks holes into this to get to the water. But because it's got this great big trunk, people have used them. So they will have cut out a hole in the center of it. And in some parts of Africa, they've been used as a post office. There's been a post office in there, public toilets, all sorts of things hollowed out inside the tree.
And the tree still lives? It still lives.
It still lives. Yeah, incredible. And it's those
fascinating
that really excited me when I was asked to write this, a home for every plant, Wonders of the Botanical World, it's called. And
I love that.
The artwork, as Jennifer and Jeff already know, the artwork, it is fantastic. It makes it come alive. And the
gorgeous.
They're exciting. And I love things with a wow factor. And you go,
yes.
That's great. That's great.
Now tell us who the publisher is and where everyone can look this up.
It's Faden Publishers.
Okay.
It's due to be published in the US on the 11th. I was comfortable about that because that's before the UK. But it's America in there. I've got in there first, and you'll be able to, buy it online or through Faden Publishers and check it out. And the great thing about it, I feel, because after writing it, I thought, well, I better read it. See what it's like as a read. I know the pictures are great. I was fascinated because it pitches in, it's the kind of thing that Granny and Grandpa, Granddad and Grandma will think, I'm going to read this before I give it to my grandchildren, because it's got those kind of exciting and interesting facts. and amazing stories about, the descriptions of the weather and the climate. So it's really trying to tie everything in together, in a fun and exciting way with big, bold pictures and lots of really, really exciting, quirky, mad, crazy plant facts.
I love it.
I do too.
I can't wait to get this book.
I'm going to have to get this because you might have just converted me into a botany lover, a plant lover here. So I'm going to have to get this book. This sounds so fun. But we are at the time in the show where we ask our guests to give our listeners a challenge. So I'm very curious what your challenge is going to be for our listeners, Matthew.
Yeah, so my challenge is this one, is to go into your supermarket and see how many different plant-based things you can find.
Oh, wow.
And I'm asking you to do this, not just around the vegetables.
The easy ones.
but go around the whole place and just put a tick every time you see something. And there are lots of things in the supermarket that you don't realize are made from plants. And I'll give you some clues. One great place to go be the cosmetics and medicines.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't thinking of those aisles.
No. I think this is going to be a great challenge. We'll have to see how many different things. I mean, it might be a challenge to find out which ones don't come from plants.
Can I just tell you my favorite one?
Please.
Yes.
And I don't know whether you have a sweet called Smartie in the US.
We do.
Smarties, right. So when you have some Smarties next time, have a look on the back of the packet and it'll say carnauba wax. Carnauba wax is the wax that puts the shiny glaze on Smarties, and it's from a palm tree in Brazil.
What?
Wow.
There you go.
There you go.
I love it.
This
is going to be
that
fun.
will always be my favorite.
This is going to be fun.
Oh my gosh, this has been such a great episode.
Yes.
I learned so much about plants and have a greater appreciation for them. So thank you so much for being on Solve It for Kids, Matthew.
Thank you for having me. And happy planting, everyone. Keep loving your plants.
Excellent.
You weren't kidding at the start, Jen. This was so much fun. We say it a lot, but we really could have talked to Matthew for hours. And I have to jump straight to this challenge. Go to the supermarket and count the number of items with plant ingredients. I think this challenge is going to blow everybody's mind.
Yeah, exactly. Or I told you the easier way to do this might be to count the things that don't have plants in them. But I think this is really fun, and I think this would be a great exercise for kids to do while they're shopping.
Absolutely.
But if you do this, we would love to hear either foods you found with plants in them or foods that you found that didn't have plants in them.
Yes.
Make sure you tag us on our social media. We are at KidsSolve at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to check out our website, solveitforkids.com, where you can see pictures of Matthew and learn all about his amazing book.
Absolutely. I can't wait to get a copy of that book. And if you are looking for Jen and Jeff, we will be at the grocery store doing this challenge. Until next time, you'll hear Jen and Jeff on
Solve It for Kids.